Stop it! No woman comes close to me.
Everyone in Seoul knew one thing about the man they called the Wolf of Gangnam. He had one unbreakable rule. Never let a woman get close. Not once. Not ever. Not for anyone. Socialites begged for his attention at every gala he was forced to attend. Models slipped their numbers into his coat pocket without even asking his name. Heiresses flew in from Tokyo and Paris just to stand in the same room as him, hoping he'd notice them. He looked through every single one of them like they were glass. No dates. No romance. No exceptions. No love. Until the night an ordinary Senegalese woman grabbed his wrist in the freezing Seoul rain and accused him of being a common thief. Nobody, not even his own men, could have predicted what that single mistake would set in motion. By the time this story ends, the man who swore his heart was sealed shut forever will be on his knees in the snow, begging her never to leave him. Before we continue, comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching this from tonight. If you love a slow burn romance that turns your whole heart upside down, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this story with someone who needs a little love tonight. Now, let's begin. Her name was Aminata Diop. She had been living in Seoul for almost a year, working 2 jobs, smiling through both of them even on the days her feet ached and her purse was nearly empty. That night, the rain came down hard and unforgiving, the kind that soaked through jackets and patience in equal measure. She had just left her second job, walking fast with her bag clutched tightly against her chest, when a hand brushed past her shoulder and yanked roughly at the strap. She didn't think. She reacted on pure instinct. She spun around and grabbed the nearest wrist she could find, holding on with both hands. "I said give me my bag," she shouted, her voice slicing through the rain and the noise of the street. The man she was gripping went completely, eerily still. Within seconds, 3 men in dark suits materialized out of nowhere, surrounding her like a wall of shadows. Her heart dropped straight into her stomach. "Let go of him," one of them said, his voice low and edged with warning. She finally looked up, properly, at the man whose wrist she was crushing in her grip. A sharp jaw. Calm, unreadable eyes that didn't seem to register fear at all. Rain sliding down a face that looked like it had never once flinched at anything in its life. I'm sorry, I thought," she stammered, releasing his wrist as if it had burned her. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. Then, a few feet away, a man came sprinting out of a narrow alley, clutching an actual stolen handbag. Not hers. Everyone turned at once. The real thief froze the moment he saw the small army of bodyguards. He dropped the bag in the middle of the wet street and bolted into the dark. Aminata's face burned with humiliation. She slowly turned back to the man she had just accused, her hands pressed together in front of her chest. "I am so sorry. I genuinely thought you were. I don't even know what I thought," she said, her words tumbling over each other. For a long, heavy second, he said absolutely nothing. Then he laughed. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, almost rusty, like something he hadn't used in a long time. But his bodyguards exchanged a look between themselves, as though they'd just witnessed a small miracle. "You grabbed the wrong man," he said simply, his voice deep, amused, completely unbothered. "Clearly," she muttered, still mortified, water dripping off her lashes. He studied her a moment longer than he needed to. Her wet hair clinging to her face. Her flushed cheeks. The stubborn way she still held her ground even now, even drenched, even embarrassed out of her mind. "Interesting," he said, almost to himself. Then he turned and walked away into the rain, his men falling into step behind him, leaving her standing alone on the street, soaked, confused, and unable to stop thinking about the way he'd said that one single word. She didn't even know his name. And yet, somehow, she already knew she wouldn't forget his face. That night, soaked and freezing, she got home to find her roommate Fatima still awake, curled up on the couch with a cup of tea. "You're late," Fatima said, then took one look at her face. "Why do you look like that?" "Like what?" "Like something happened." "Nothing happened," Aminata said, peeling off her wet jacket. "I just grabbed the wrong man's wrist tonight and accused him of being a thief." Fatima sat up immediately. "You did what?" "It's a long story. You have nowhere to be. Tell me." Aminata recounted the whole thing, the rain, the bodyguards, the way he'd laughed like it had surprised even him. Fatima listened with her mouth slightly open. "And he just walked away?" He said interesting and walked away. "Interesting," Fatima repeated slowly. "Aminata. Do you know who that sounds like?" "No, and I don't want to know. I have a new job tomorrow. I am not thinking about strange rich men in the rain." "Sure," Fatima said, smirking into her tea. "You're not thinking about him at all." Aminata threw a cushion at her and went to bed, telling herself the same thing over and over. It meant nothing. A stranger in the rain. That was all. She was wrong. The next morning, she woke up still thinking about him, annoyed at herself for it. She had no time for mystery men in expensive coats. She had rent to pay and a new job to start, her first day at one of the most luxurious hotels in Seoul, a position she had fought hard to get. If you're already hooked, drop a comment telling me what you think is about to happen, and don't forget to hit that like button before we move forward. The next morning, Aminata walked into the grand lobby of the hotel, eyes wide at the marble floors and gold trim, her heart pounding with first-day nerves. She had no idea what was waiting for her. Then she saw him. Standing near the front desk in a sharp dark suit, speaking quietly to a manager, was the man from the rain. Her stomach dropped straight to the floor. He looked up. Their eyes met. For one horrifying second, neither of them moved. "You," she whispered, barely audible. "Me," he said, the corner of his mouth lifting just slightly. She panicked instantly. "Sir, I swear, I didn't know you owned this hotel. If I'd known, would never have grabbed you like that, Relax," he said, cutting through her rambling. "You apologized enough last night." The manager beside him looked thoroughly confused, glancing between the two of them, sensing something he couldn't quite explain. "She'll be working VIP services," the man said simply, then turned and walked off without another word. The staff around her stared at each other in disbelief. Nobody, absolutely nobody, got placed into VIP services on their very first day. By
Some
lunchtime,
employees waited
word had
years for
already
that
spread
position.
through the entire hotel. Their owner, the man who barely acknowledged staff existed, had personally assigned the new girl to his own department. Not everyone took the news well. Soo-yun, one of the senior VIP staff who had spent 3 years angling for his attention, cornered Aminata by the staff lockers that same afternoon. "Do you know how long I've worked here?" she asked coldly. "I don't, actually," Aminata said, genuinely confused. 3 years. And you walk in on day one and he hands you VIP services like it's nothing. "I didn't ask for it." "Doesn't matter," Soo-yun said, eyes narrowing. "Enjoy it while it lasts. Men like him don't keep anyone around for long." Aminata held her gaze, refusing to flinch. "Then I guess we'll see, won't we?" Soo-yun walked off without another word, and Aminata exhaled slowly, telling herself it didn't matter what anyone thought. She had a job to do. A few days into the job, Aminata found herself bringing him his evening tea, exactly the way she'd been instructed to. He sat near the window, staring out at the city lights, lost somewhere far away in his own thoughts. "You know," she said, setting the tray down gently, "smiling actually suits you. You should try it more than once a decade." He looked up, almost startled. Nobody spoke to him this way. Ever. "Is that so?" he said, the ghost of a smile threatening to return. I'm just saying. Free advice, no charge. I don't take advice. You're taking it right now, she said, already walking away before he could respond, leaving him sitting there with an expression he hadn't worn in years. A few evenings later, she brought him something different, a small plate of food she'd made herself, spiced jollof rice with grilled fish, a recipe from home that always reminded her of her mother's kitchen. What is this? He asked, eyeing it with open suspicion. Food. Real food. Try it before you insult it. He hesitated, picked up the fork slowly, and took a small bite. His eyebrows lifted just slightly. This is, actually good. I know, she said, grinning. I told you. He didn't say much else, but he finished the entire plate, scraping the last grain of rice without even noticing he'd done it. After that night, she started noticing something. He always ate alone. Every single time, no matter the hour. Why do you always eat by yourself? She asked one evening, sitting across from him at his private table without waiting for an invitation. It's easier, he said simply, not looking up. She tilted her head, studying him. Easier isn't always happier, you know. He didn't answer right away. Something about the way she said it settled somewhere deep in his chest, somewhere he thought he had locked tightly shut years ago and thrown away the key. His bodyguards began whispering among themselves whenever she walked by. Their boss, the man who never lingered anywhere, who never looked twice at anyone, was suddenly lingering. Often. Around one person. If you're already loving the chemistry building between these two, hit that like button right now, and tell me in the comments, do you think she's the one who finally breaks down every wall he's built? Let's keep going, because it's about to get even more emotional. A few days later, he showed up at the staff entrance holding a bag, looking slightly out of place doing something so ordinary. What is that? Aminata asked, eyeing it with suspicion. Open it. Inside was a thick, expensive winter coat, clearly tailored, clearly not cheap. Absolutely not, she said immediately, pushing it back toward him. I'm not taking this. You shiver every time the wind blows. It's distracting. Distracting how? I notice it, he said, then seemed almost annoyed at himself for admitting that out loud. Just take the coat, Aminata. I can buy my own coat. I know you can. Take it anyway. She stared at him, arms crossed tightly, before finally sighing and pulling it on over her shoulders. It was warm. Too warm. Warmer than it had any right to be. Thank you, she muttered, refusing to meet his eyes. You're welcome, he said, and for once, he didn't walk away immediately afterward. After that night, something between them shifted, slowly, naturally, like a door easing open after years of being shut. They started walking together after her shifts ended, just around the block, just talking about nothing and everything at once. Say something in Korean, she said one night, breath visible in the cold air. Bogashipio, he said quietly. What does that mean? Figure it out yourself, he said, smirking, refusing to translate it for her. She laughed and shoved his arm lightly. Fine. Then teach me something in Wolof instead. Nope. Not until you tell me what that word means. That's not how this works. It's exactly how this works, he said, and she rolled her eyes, laughing harder than she had in months. They bickered like that for blocks, laughing more than either of them had in years, maybe ever, in his case. He teased her about her terrible attempts at Korean pronunciation. She teased him about how he never smiled in photos. They shared street food from a small cart, her teaching him how to eat it properly, him pretending he already knew. You're holding it wrong, she said, watching him struggle with the skewer. There's a wrong way to hold food? There is when you're about to drop it on your very expensive shoes. He adjusted his grip, deliberately slow, watching her the entire time instead of the food. Better? Marginally, she said, laughing. You laugh at me a lot for someone who works for me. You should pay me more, then. Consider it hazard pay for putting up with you. Noted, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting in that small, rare way she had come to recognize as something just for her. For the first time in a long time, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow. Just to see her face again. Then came a twist nobody saw coming. His father, the silent founder of the empire he now ran, summoned him for dinner one evening, and Aminata was asked to deliver some documents he'd forgotten at the office. She walked in just in time to hear a name she didn't recognize. The Han family has agreed, his father said firmly, sliding a folder across the table. The merger depends on this marriage. You will meet their daughter this weekend. Aminata froze in the doorway, the folder in her hands suddenly feeling far heavier than it should. He didn't even glance toward his father's offer. I'm not marrying anyone for a merger. You don't have a choice in this. I always have a choice, he said coldly, then finally noticed Aminata standing frozen by the door. His expression shifted instantly. Aminata. But she had already set the folder down and turned to leave, her heart pounding painfully in her chest. He caught up to her in the hallway, gently catching her wrist. That meant nothing. I'm not going anywhere near that arrangement. You don't owe me an explanation, she said quietly, though her voice trembled slightly.
I'm not explaining myself because I owe you one, he said firmly. I'm explaining because I need you to actually believe me. And if your father refuses to back down, then he loses a son before I ever lose you, he said simply, no hesitation in his voice at all. She searched his face for a long moment, looking for even the smallest trace of doubt. She found none. Okay, she whispered finally. Okay, he echoed, pulling her gently into his side as they walked back down the hallway together. That night, she called her mother into car, needing to hear a familiar voice. A merger, Mama. His father wants him to marry someone else for business. And what did he say? Her mother asked calmly, the way she always did, like nothing in the world could rattle her. He said he'd rather lose his family than lose me. There was a long pause on the line, then her mother's voice, softer now. Then he sounds like a man who already knows what matters. Don't be afraid of his father, Aminata. Be afraid of a man who wouldn't fight for you at all. I love him, Mama. I know, her mother said simply. I could hear it in your voice before you even said it. But not everyone was happy watching this unfold. His enemies, rivals who had spent years waiting for even the smallest crack in his armor, caught wind of how close he'd grown to a hotel employee, and they moved quickly, like vultures circling something wounded. Photos appeared online within days. Blurry, edited, twisted to look far worse than reality. Headlines screamed that she was a gold digger who had trapped Seoul's most untouchable man for his money and his name. Aminata's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Comments. Messages. Strangers calling her things she had never once been called in her entire life. Things that made her stomach turn every time she opened her notifications. She didn't want to be the reason his name was dragged through the mud, the reason his empire became a punchline. So quietly, without telling him a single word, she handed in her resignation letter and packed her things. When he found out an hour later, he didn't yell. He went terrifyingly calm instead, the kind of calm his men had learned, over the years, to fear far more than his anger. Where is she? He asked his assistant flatly, already moving toward the door. She resigned an hour ago, sir. She's gone. He found her outside the staff entrance, bag slung over one shoulder, eyes red and swollen though she was trying hard not to show it. You're leaving, he said, stopping in front of her. It's better this way, she said quietly, refusing to look directly at him. I don't want to ruin your name. I don't want to be the reason people whisper about you. You think I care about my name? He asked, stepping closer. You should care. I don't, he said firmly. Not when it comes to you. Not even a little. They're calling me a gold digger, she said, voice cracking. They're saying I trapped you. I can't make that stop. I can't fix that. You don't have to fix anything. Let me handle it. How? Watch me, he said simply, and something in his voice told her he meant every word of it. The next morning, in front of cameras, in front of his own board members, in front of an entire country watching live, he made an announcement absolutely no one expected to hear. Reporters shouted questions over each other the moment he stepped up to the podium. Sir, can you confirm the reports about your relationship with a hotel employee? Is it true the Han family has withdrawn from merger talks? He raised a hand and the room fell silent. I chose her, he said simply, his voice unshaken. Her name is Aminata Diop, and she is the reason I remember what it feels like to be a person instead of a name on a building. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. A murmur swept through the room. Somewhere near the back, his father stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, saying nothing. And the merger? A reporter pressed. The merger was never worth more than my own life, he said. If my father wants to discuss business, he knows where to find me. This isn't a negotiation. He stepped down from the podium without taking another question, ignoring the flashing cameras, ignoring the shouting, walking straight past his father without slowing down. You're really doing this, his father said quietly as he passed. I already did it, he replied, not even turning around. The headlines exploded within minutes. The man who had never once defended a woman in his life had just defended one with everything he had, in front of the entire world, sacrificing a fortune in the same breath. Aminata, watching the broadcast from her small apartment, pressed a trembling hand over her mouth as tears slipped freely down her cheeks. She finally understood, fully, completely. He wasn't just protecting her reputation. He loved her. A week later, sitting together on the balcony of his penthouse, she finally asked him the question that had been sitting heavy in her chest since the very night they met. Why do you keep everyone at a distance? Really? Tell me the truth this time. He went quiet for a long moment, his jaw tightening, his eyes drifting somewhere far away from her. My mother died protecting me, he finally said, voice low. I was 12 years old. There was an attack meant for my father, and she stepped in front of it instead of running. She didn't even hesitate. Aminata's breath caught painfully in her throat. I'm so sorry. I remember her last words, he continued, voice barely above a whisper. She told me to be careful who I let close. I think I misunderstood her. I think she meant be careful, not be alone forever. What did she actually mean, do you think? I don't know anymore, he admitted. For years I told myself it meant the same thing. Don't let anyone in. Don't give anyone the power to break you the way losing her broke me. Since then, he continued, staring down at his own hands, I told myself that loving anyone too much just gives them a way to destroy you completely. So I stopped. I shut it all down. Completely. For years. She reached over slowly and took his hand, holding it gently between both of hers, like something fragile she was afraid of breaking. You weren't protecting other people all this time, she whispered. You were protecting your own heart. He looked at her then, something breaking quietly behind his eyes, something he had held together for over a decade finally giving way. I didn't expect you, he said quietly. I had a whole life built around never expecting anyone. I didn't expect you either, she said, smiling softly through her own tears now. I came to Seoul to work, not to fall in love with a man who almost had me arrested for grabbing his wrist. He let out a wet, broken laugh, the sound catching somewhere between a sob and relief. For the first time in years, he cried. Not from pain, from relief. She pulled him into her arms without saying another word, letting him hold on to her the way he hadn't let himself hold on to anyone in over 10 long years. You don't have to carry this by yourself anymore, she whispered softly against his shoulder. Not anymore. I'm right here. He held her tighter, like he was terrified that if he let go even for a second, she might disappear too, just like everyone else he had ever loved. A few days passed peacefully. Then, without any warning at all, he disappeared. No calls, no texts, no messages of any kind. Aminata's mind spiraled into worry. Had it been too much? Had she pushed too far asking about his mother? Had he changed his mind about everything about her? Maybe he just needs space, Fatima offered gently on the second night, watching Aminata stare at her silent phone for the 100th time. Or maybe I scared him off. You didn't scare a mafia boss off by asking him a question. I asked him about his dead mother, Fatima. Okay, fair point, Fatima admitted, but still. Give him a minute. It's been 2 days. 2 days isn't forever. It feels like forever, Aminata whispered, hugging her knees to her chest. Then, on the third silent night, a single message finally lit up her phone screen. Come outside. Please. Her heart leapt into her throat before she even had time to think. She stepped out of her apartment building, pulling her coat, his coat, tighter around her shoulders, and stopped completely still in the middle of the sidewalk. He was standing beneath a row of glowing string lights, holding a simple bouquet of white flowers, no bodyguards in sight, no suits, no empire trailing behind him. Just him, standing there, waiting. What is all this? She breathed, hand already rising to cover her mouth. I spent the last 3 days ending every illegal deal I had left, cutting every dangerous tie, walking away from anything that could ever put you in danger again, he said, stepping closer. She covered her mouth completely now, eyes already filling with tears she couldn't hold back. I wasn't changing my life for you, he continued quietly. I was changing it for us. She broke completely, tears spilling freely as she stepped straight into him, wrapping her arms tightly around his middle, burying her face against his chest. I always prayed someone would love me just for being me, she admitted softly into his shirt. Not for anything else. Just me. Exactly as I am. He tilted her chin upward gently with one finger. You were always enough, Aminata. From the very first night you grabbed the wrong man's wrist in the freezing rain. She laughed through her tears, the sound shaky but genuine. I really did grab the wrong man that night. Best mistake of my entire life, he murmured, brushing a tear from her cheek. So, she whispered, looking up at him through wet lashes, what happens now? Now, he said softly, I spend every single tomorrow loving you more than I did today. That's the only plan I have. That's not a very detailed plan, she teased, laughing through her tears. It's the only one that matters, he said, smiling down at her. Are you still afraid? She asked quietly. Of love, I mean. He shook his head slowly, eyes never leaving hers. I'm only afraid of losing you. That's the only fear I have left. You won't lose me, she promised firmly. I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. Say that again, he murmured. I'm not going anywhere, she repeated, softer this time, like a vow whispered just for him. He reached up and gently cupped her face in both hands, his thumb brushing softly along her cheekbone. May I? He asked quietly, voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, breathless, heart pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it. He kissed her then, slow and deep and certain, nothing like a nervous first kiss should ever feel, and exactly like every single promise they had quietly made to one another over the past weeks. When they finally pulled apart, she smiled through fresh tears, resting her forehead gently against his. I've been waiting for you to kiss me like that since the day you bought me that coat. I've been trying to behave myself this whole time, he said, laughing softly, the sound warm against her skin. Don't, she whispered, pulling him back down toward her again. I don't want you behaving. I want you loving me. Openly. Completely. Then that's exactly what you'll have, he said, kissing her forehead, then her cheek, then finally her lips again, slower this time. She laughed against his mouth. You're going to make me cry again. Good, he whispered. Cry happy this time. He lifted her off the ground entirely, spinning her once as she laughed against his shoulder, soft snow beginning to drift gently around them both, catching in her hair. "Everyone," he called out suddenly, loud enough for the quiet street to hear, voice full of something that sounded almost like freedom. "The great, untouchable Wolf of Gangnam is hopelessly, completely, irreversibly in love with one Senegalese woman." A few passers-by stopped and stared, smiling, phones quietly rising to capture the moment, someone in the distance softly clapping. "Say it again," she whispered, looking straight into his eyes, refusing to look away even for a second. He held her face steady in both hands and said it slowly this time, like a vow spoken only for her. "I love you more than every single rule I ever lived by." "And I love you," she said, voice trembling, "more than I ever thought I was allowed to." He kissed her once more beneath the falling snow, soft and unhurried, and hand in hand, they walked together into the glowing streets of Seoul, laughing quietly, finally free from every fear that had once kept them apart, proving that even the hardest heart can be gently softened by the right kind of love. Behind them, Seoul glittered on, indifferent to empires and mergers and headlines, caring only about two people who had finally chosen each other over everything else they'd been told to want. Somewhere across the city, his father watched the footage of the announcement one more time and, for the first time, said nothing in protest at all. Somewhere in Dakar, a mother smiled at a phone call she hadn't expected, already knowing her daughter had found something rare. And somewhere on that quiet, snow-covered street, two people who once stood as strangers in the rain now stood wrapped around each other, certain, finally, of exactly where they belonged. If this love story warmed your heart tonight the way it warmed mine while telling it, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone special who could use a little hope in love right now. And before you go, tell me honestly in the comments, at what exact moment did you know he had truly, completely fallen for her? See you in